All right, here we go. Episode 150 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. We made it to 150. And you know something? I got to be honest with you guys. There was almost going to be no episode this week. I was going to push 150 back, draft recap the following week. Because I said, you know what? I just don't have the expertise, just don't have the knowledge, or the will to BS my way through a draft preview, in the sense that I was going to try to tell you something other than, well, the Ravens need this position group or this position group, because that's really all I know. And I was thinking this Wednesday, Thursday, and I said the only thing that could get me to do an episode would be if something crazy happened with the Orioles or Orlando Brown Jr. gets traded. And I was saying this Wednesday, Thursday. Now, it's not like it came completely out of left field. We also have been kind of anticipating this for months and months and months based on, we'll get into everything, but, you know, I was almost not going to do an episode. And then the news broke late yesterday afternoon, and I said, all right, we're doing one. Got my notes together. It's Saturday morning. We've had a little bit of time to digest this, the instant reactions, the hot takes. Hopefully those have passed, and we can get into the finer details of this. Do want to talk about that. That's going to be the main emphasis here. A little bit of a draft preview, mainly what are the Ravens going to do with these new additional picks that they've received from the Chiefs. And I also want to talk about something that I don't think is being talked about quite a bit, for good reason. It may not be the most important or pressing issue right now, but we'll get into that a little bit later. I'll keep it a secret for you for the end of the episode. But Orlando Brown Jr., he's on the move. The Ravens finally found a suitor for a good trade. And to the surprise of some, that team is the Kansas City Chiefs. So with the draft right around the corner and a recent free agent tackle, which we're going to get into in a second, coming for a visit, is the timing here very unusual? No, not at all. But even without those, the timing wouldn't necessarily be unusual. Just again, this is something we've been talking about for months. This was something we were talking about and discussing as a possibility before Orlando Brown Jr. even made it kind of a big deal by making it known that he wanted to be traded or go play left tackle for another team. And especially after Stanley got his big payday in the middle of last season, you start saying, all right, well, the money's just not there to pay both of them. Orlando Brown Jr., 1 full year left on his contract after this 2020 season. Do you deal him? Do you try to get, something in return? And that sparked the debate. And, you had people falling on both sides. And I myself found myself leaning more towards the keep him side, if we're being honest. And I think that's been expressed on this podcast. I've always been open to a trade. I didn't particularly see the Kansas City Chiefs as a potential suitor, but I've been open to a trade just because I knew deep down that DaCosta wouldn't give him away for nothing. And we look at the compensation the Ravens have received here. It's more than nothing. It's not a king's ransom by any means, but you're not going to get that from a team like the Chiefs. So there's a lot of factors here, but while I was open to the possibility of a trade because I knew DaCosta wouldn't, give him away for nothing, and I trust that. And at the end of the day, giving away a guy that's going to leave within a year and getting some return out of him more than a third-round comp pick, yeah, that's great. That's obviously a better scenario. But I have expressed time and time again that the Ravens are in a win-now mode. And if you have a chance to roll into the 2021 season where you're trying to go and win a Super Bowl, and you can know that you're going to have Ronnie Stanley back from injury lining up at left tackle, Orlando Brown Jr. lining up at right tackle, that is a nice sense of security for a team that had some offensive line issues last year. Now, again, Ronnie Stanley goes down with the injury. That's a huge factor. I mean, outside of Lamar Jackson, he might be number 2 on the list of guys you don't want to see go down or you can't afford to lose for a majority of the season. The Ravens had some instability on O-line. Even with a healthy Ronnie Stanley, keep him at left tackle, Orlando Brown Jr. never has to move. The Ravens had big issues at the center position in some crucial games, the playoff game against Buffalo being one of them. They also couldn't quite figure out what they were doing at right guard. It was sort of a rotating, revolving door at that position. So again, really not good stability all around. But if you had Ronnie Stanley, things would be better. I think we can all admit that. If you had Nick Boyle, you could probably cover some blemishes as well, but he goes down. So there's other factors at play, but the Ravens, there's no doubt, they had their offensive line issues, and I was saying, why would you create another need? Why would you create another hole on the offensive line to fill? You know, the Ravens earlier this offseason seemed to address the right guard issue, signing Kevin Zeitler. But now, you know, you plug Zeitler in, now Orlando Brown Jr. is gone. So you've got another hole to fill, and tackle, whether it's right tackle or left tackle, is harder to find than a guard in this league. I know left tackle is the unicorn position, so to speak, where, you know, not even all 32 teams have a capable starter at left tackle. They really are that rare. Right tackle, a little more easy to find, but still, tackles in general, good tackles, just not, they're not dime a dozen. So I was always of the mindset, you're in a win now mode. That's first and foremost. Why would you give away a guy that's a huge asset to your offensive line, has been super consistent for you, also has swingman capabilities in the event that Ronnie Stanley does go down? Freak accidents happen. I'm not, you know, beating up on Ronnie Stanley, but let's be honest, Ronnie Stanley hasn't played a full 16 games in his entire career. So forget the freak injury that sends him out for the entire season. Can't do anything about that. Really can't do anything about most injuries. But Ronnie Stanley, we know he gets his bumps and bruises. He's going to miss a game here. He's going to miss a game there. So in the event that you have to cover that left tackle position for a game or two, the versatility of Orlando Brown Jr. to swing from right tackle to left tackle, even if it's for just a game or two, is invaluable. I was willing to roll with him for 2021 just to ensure that you have the best offensive line possible, the best resources protecting Lamar Jackson, and you're not going to re-sign him. You let him walk. You get a third-round comp pick in return. Is that as good as a haul you get in a trade? Not even close. But again, if you heard me last week and we were talking about it with Pass Rush, I'm not concerned about future draft capital right now. I'm not saying the Ravens should be ignoring it, but as a fan, as someone who avidly watches a team, I'm sorry, I don't really give a damn about future draft capital right now. I just don't. Especially if we're talking about comp picks, which are third round or worse, fourth round, fifth round. So I'm sorry. I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it. In the case of this, the draft picks you get in return are much more valuable than a comp pick, but you're in a win now mode. And if you have the chance to keep all the best resources you can in order to push for a Super Bowl, in my opinion, you do that. The Ravens, I'm sure they weighed all the possibilities, and the end result is sending Orlando Brown Jr. to the biggest team standing in the Ravens' way in terms of going to the Super Bowl, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not crazy about this deal. If you can't tell, I'm not crazy about it. I don't hate it. I think it's a fine return. I think it's going to work out okay. I can tell you this right off the bat. It's obviously any sweeping statements about who won this trade right now are absolutely absurd. But the only people I'm seeing make those comments are all the kids on Twitter that don't even, you know who I'm talking about. Kids on Twitter, their screen name is Lamar Jackson, the GOAT, or Marquise Brown, so swaggy, 01 is their screen name. Hint, hint, they were born in 2001. They're a child. Their profile picture is a heavily edited picture of Marlon Humphrey, of Marcus Peters, of Lamar Jackson with a goat superimposed over Lamar Jackson. These children, Lamar MVP, Lamar GOAT, I'm just making those up off the top of my head. They're most certainly real people that I'm just inadvertently calling out because they're just so generic screen names. But those are children. They are not to be taken seriously. They are a plague on Twitter. And those are the only ones that I'm seeing. Oh, the Chiefs completely fleeced the Ravens, making fun of the, Eric DaCosta and everything and saying that he got absolutely pantsed here or something like that. And you know what? In the long run, maybe he did. But you don't know that right now. You certainly don't know that right now. And you're going to have to wait at least a week, a little over a week, to see what happens in the draft next weekend. And quite frankly, you're going to have to wait even longer than that to see how those picks develop and what they end up being. What are the Ravens even going to do with these picks? Again, on the surface value, we know what the Ravens got in return here. First-round pick, third-round pick, fourth-round pick for this year's draft, and then a fifth-rounder next year. That changes everything. I think on the surface right now, it's a trade that both teams can be happy with. Although if I'm a Chiefs fan, while I do like that you're bringing in a good right tackle to pair with Thuney, now you've got good anchors, good bookends for your line to protect Pat Mahomes. That's a good thing. They've been to back-to-back Super Bowls. Who's to say they won't go on another Super Bowl run this year? They're certainly the favorite in the AFC. But start looking down the road a little bit if I'm a Chiefs fan. I don't know if they can pay Orlando Brown Jr. And in the event that he plays 1 year for you, they would get the third-round comp pick in return when he eventually walks and signs elsewhere. But at that point, if you're the Chiefs, you just gave up 3 draft picks in 1 year and then a fifth-rounder from the following year for a guy that plays 1 year for you. And yes, the Ravens are sending a second-rounder in return, so that offsets one of the picks. But still, I don't know. And that just goes back to my point here. Time will reveal everything here. Time will give us the truth. We don't know who won this trade right now. That's absolutely absurd. I'm not crazy about it. We know that. But here's what I do like about it. The Ravens had to get a first rounder for Orlando Brown Jr. We knew that. If he was going to be dealt, you were going to have to get at least a first rounder in return, and the Ravens secured that. Now, by sending their second round pick in return, you sort of have a swap situation where the Ravens are sliding up. They convert that second round pick, slide up into the 31st pick in the first round. Now you have 2 first round picks, which have a lot of weight to them, even though they are both late round, first round picks. There's a lot of value there. So it's not the straight up first rounder that I think a lot of people hoped for, including myself. And the fact that they're so close together, that's the other thing. I think some people would say, well, if you traded with another team that's maybe more desperate, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, if you find a different team that's not the Chiefs, a team that's not a perennial contender, a team that's desperate to get a good left tackle, you might get a better return. And they might be more willing to give up just a straight-up first-rounder. And then, oh, by the way, that first-round pick is going to be somewhere earlier in the draft, not 31st in the first round, like the Chiefs. But it is what it is. And I do think the fact that they're so close together gives the Ravens some versatility. It gives them sort of what I'm going to call the luxury of being able to either move up or sell one of those picks and move back and stack even more picks in the later rounds. I think we all know, if you're a Ravens fan, if you've been a Ravens fan for at least 5 minutes in your life, you know that it's way more likely they're going to trade back than up. But I do think they have that. The door is open, is what I'm saying. You have these 2 picks, 27 and 31 in the first round. There is that the door is open to move up. And I think that's a luxury. Because once the draft starts and names start flying off the board, the Ravens and all their scouts and all their experts, as far as the draft are concerned, they can do their best to predict how things are going to shake out. But once it gets rolling, you don't know what's going to happen until you're in the heat of the moment. So other trades are happening. Other teams are moving up and down. At that point, predictions from the previous week completely go out the window as to who's going to do what and who's going to take who where. So could there be a scenario that shakes out where the Ravens say, we could move up like 10 spots and take this guy that's an absolute stud? Let's do it. I'm saying it's unlikely, but the door is open. At the end of the day, I do think they will move back. They're going to end up moving and trading one of those pieces and moving back. On the subject of replacing Orlando Brown Jr., there's a couple options. One is obviously the draft. But I do want to mention this one name because this certain someone came in for a visit earlier this week, and it was brushed aside. Eric DaCosta, Joe Ortiz, and John Harbaugh had their pre-draft press conference where they talked a lot about the draft, but also some other things. And at the time, nothing was said about Orlando Brown Jr. DaCosta got out in front of that. He also said he wouldn't be commenting on any players that may or may not be visiting the castle. But we have received reports this week that Alejandro Villanueva has visited the Ravens. You recognize that name. 7 years with the Steelers. He's now a free agent. And for that entire time, he was a stalwart piece of that offensive line in Pittsburgh. Played every single game from 2016 to 2020. And while it wasn't a great end to 2020 for him, not his best season, and he may not be the most tantalizing option for that reason, that reliability, that stability, and that experience playing in the tough AFC North, that can't go unrecognized. And it's not going unrecognized for me. So let me just start by saying, Villanueva, is he the answer for the Ravens at right tackle? As a starter, no. I would not be the most confident rolling into week 1 with him as your starting right tackle. However, I have a hard time believing that he would be worse than DJ Fluker. And we know his entire career he's played left tackle for the Steelers. So, again, if something were to happen to Ronnie Stanley for a game or two, and you needed a guy that to maybe move over, Villanueva's played left tackle his entire career. There have been some conflicting reports. Some are saying the Ravens are being very heavily linked to him and that a deal is imminent. Others are saying, hey, slow your roll there. I don't know if this is a smokescreen or not. I have a hard time believing this would be a smokescreen. Again, you bring him in earlier this week. You kind of know in the back of your head, we're working out this deal with Kansas City. It's close. You've always had in the back of your mind, whether it's the Chiefs or other teams that were knocking at the door and potentially close to working out a trade with the Ravens. So I think the visit was legit, and I also think the move would make sense for the Ravens. Now, we have heard that at this point, April 24th, draft right here on the horizon, that it's most likely the Ravens would wait until after the early May deadline to sign Villanueva to preserve comp picks. Last week, I know, very passionately ranted about how, screw these comp picks, go get your guy that you need now. When it comes to pass rush, I stand by that. Absolutely agree. Justin Houston, what are we doing here? Now, again, Houston still on the market. Still, again, we're getting closer and closer. If he doesn't sign elsewhere by that early May deadline, then hey, and the Ravens swoop in and grab him, more power to him. Again, they know more than I do at the end of the day, but I stand by what I was saying. Why are you waiting? Why are you even taking that risk when you need a pass rusher so bad? And while you do need a right tackle pretty bad, Villanueva is not the long-term answer there. He's sort of going to play the role of DJ Fluker. I think he's better than Fluker. I think he can give you more than Fluker did, but that's the kind of role he is. He's the backup, the swing man, in the event of an injury to either tackle. He could play both positions. It all adds up to making him a valuable bench piece at the tackle position that if he needs to start a handful of games for you, you're feeling okay. For Villanueva, I think it makes sense to wait. And if he came in for a visit earlier this week and both parties think that it's a good fit, I really don't see him running off elsewhere, signing with a different team between now and that early May deadline for comp picks. I just don't see it. Justin Houston, some of these other pass rushers, that's a different story. They're more of a hot commodity. But Villanueva, he's a guy you can get away with on waiting. So I think that's fine. And we'll have to wait and see. Now, with that being said, even if you do intend on bringing Villanueva in, right tackle should still be a position that you're looking to draft. You can't just intend to sign Villanueva and say, we can probably hold off and maybe take a tackle in the 4th round or later, some guy that like a lottery ticket. No, I mean, you probably should be thinking about taking him 3rd round at the latest. So I think I would really like to see the Ravens find a replacement for Orlando Brown Jr. in this draft, but still need the wide receiver, still need the pass rush. Now you need a right tackle. It's just there's a lot of holes to fill and only so many picks to do it with. Premium picks, that is. You can take all the 5th rounders, 6th rounders, 7th rounders that you want. You'll be lucky if 1 or 2 of those guys ends up producing for you. All right, I guess that's it. That's it for the draft. But there is this one other topic that I wanted to get to here, and I teased it at the beginning of the episode. Probably did a poor job of teasing it because I led with the fact that is this a big deal? Nah, not really. But stick around and hear what I have to say. This is the Lamar Jackson contract situation. Is this the most pressing matter for the Ravens? Is this the most important thing that we're talking about right now? Absolutely not. And everything that I've just talked about for the past 20, 25 minutes should be evidence of that. But it's lingering in the back of my mind. I'm not getting worked up about it. I'm not overly concerned about it. But it's sitting in the back of my mind, and I just can't ignore it. And if you've listened to the podcast, I feel very strongly that the Ravens should lock Lamar up right now. Give him the contract. If it was up to me, as far as a timing thing, you'd get it done right now. And that's where I stand on that. I've seen plenty between an MVP season in 2019 and, quite frankly, what he did last year, which was not as good as 2019, but still, I've seen enough the last 2 years. And really what he did coming in the end of 2018 with an offense that wasn't built around him. And I see the way he moves, and I see the way he walks. I see the way and hear the way he talks. And it's a no-brainer for me. So you sign him right now if it's up to me. There's no concerns. There's nothing impeding that decision for me. I understand negotiations aren't that simple. I don't know how close the two sides really are, how serious the talks have really been. We really have no indication of any of that. But if the Ravens were not making him a serious offer this offseason, I would be questioning their evaluation of him. Let's be honest here. The longer you wait to sign a Lamar Jackson type of guy, really any quarterback, but especially Lamar Jackson, it's just going to end up hurting your wallet more and more and more in the long run. And this is not some hidden secret. This is not some, amazing revelation that I'm telling you guys about. We all know this. This happens every single offseason, sometimes more than once in the same offseason. Quarterbacks on the cusp of getting a new contract get paid, and they one-up each other in terms of value. That's how it goes. And you want to look at a most recent case of a team that has fallen victim to waiting too long. Look no further than the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott. After waiting and waiting and waiting to seemingly decide if Dak was their guy or not, they drove the price up and up and up. Go back to 2019. Cowboys had a chance to sign Dak long term. They didn't. Go back to early 2020 offseason. They had a chance to sign him again. They didn't. Then what happened? Midsummer, Pat Mahomes signs his insane contract. A few months later, Deshaun Watson signs his contract. Now the Cowboys, after the 2020 season, they're ending up paying Dak at least a good couple million more than they need to be year to year, and a good chunk of change overall that they don't need to be paying because they waited and they waited and they waited. And I just don't want to see the Ravens suffer a similar fate. And I'm looking at the way this could shake out, and you're looking at other quarterbacks that are on the horizon. It's Josh Allen. It's not going to be Baker Mayfield. We know that the Browns are going to let him play out his fifth-year option, it seems. But Josh Allen, after the improvements he made last year, if the Bills lock him up long-term this offseason or next offseason before the Ravens do, is it the biggest deal in the world? No, you're out of a couple extra million. But I think there should be some more foresight here to say, hey, let's not drive the price up on ourselves. Because that's essentially what you're doing the longer you wait. And again, there's so many other factors at play here, and the Ravens truly could be, I don't know, they could be of the mindset of, let's wait and see what Lamar does with one more year. Maybe that's how they're approaching it. Or maybe they would love to sign him right now, but decides they're just not that close in negotiations. I don't know. But this is stuck in the back of my mind, and I cannot ignore it. And I really would hate to see the Ravens drive the price up on Lamar Jackson, who's already going to be insanely expensive to retain. Let's not drive the price up any more than it needs to be here, folks. And to me, I think it's an obvious choice. I think it's an obvious you extend him. I've never been more sure about a quarterback in my entire life than I have been about Lamar Jackson after what I've seen the last 2 seasons. I think that'll do it for episode 150. Appreciate you guys listening as always. Again, almost didn't have an episode this week, but just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. And we'll be here for 151 next week. Probably going to have to wait until Sunday night to record that one, but full draft recap. Spread the word as always. Friends, family, coworkers, whoever, random strangers on the street. Tell them about the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Tell them to subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud. Anywhere that a rational human being wants to listen to a podcast, you can find the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Again, thank you guys for listening. I'll talk to you next week.